Hello, you're here with me, Juliette Bryant, on Kindsound Radio. And today we're talking about the gut. What a great subject. And as always, I'm here with my wonderful producer, Giles Bryant.
Hello everyone in the Kindsound universe. I hope you are really doing well. So Juliette, the gut, wow, something that's certainly come into public consciousness recently, and how the health of the gut affects the health of our body and our mind.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the depths of the gut, how we can look after it and why it's so important. The gut has long been considered the second brain, and this is quite a title for it. Hippocrates, who is the father of modern medicine, said all disease begins in the gut. What a statement. All disease begins in the gut.
Now Juliette, most people think that when they say, where's your gut, they just point to the belly. Is that just the gut?
No, in fact, your gut starts at your lips and finishes at your bottom, and it's all the area in between. So your gut acts as a protection. It's like the outside of the inside of your body. Now, I know that's a little bit complicated, so I'm going to explain that again. So basically, everything from the inside, all down through your throat, down into your stomach, and then out through your anus, is all protecting your organs, like the internal part of your body. So the gut acts as a sorting office. It's a filtration device. It's a space where something enters your mouth and instantly the bacteria assess, is this friend, is this foe? Do we need to wrap this up and flush it out quick because it's a toxin? Or do we need to break this down and absorb it because this is a nutrient? So this is a really incredible process that begins, as I said, at the mouth. So everything that enters your mouth begins this process of digestion. In our mouth, we have lots and lots of bacteria. We have lots of digestive enzymes, saliva, for all these things working to break down our food. And they say that your mouth is a representation of what's happening in your gut. So if you've got bad breath, if your tongue's really coated, if you're having lots of dental problems, lots of plaque, this could be a sign of too much bad bacteria in your gut. So it's a great way to start to look at what's going on in your gut through your mouth.
So Juliette, you are broadcasting live on Kindsound. Your new slot, I believe, is at 5 p.m. on a Sunday. So if you're about to have your Sunday dinner, is this something just to put on the podcast? I mean, we've had talk speaking about bottoms, and
we are talking a little bit about bottoms and a little bit about digestive things, but nothing too squirmy, so it should be all right.
Okay, thank you. So dear listeners, you're just about to have your dinner. Keep listening. Keep the radio tuned to Kindsound.
So, what do we want to do with our gut? Why is it so important? Why is it called the second brain? So, in our gut, we have 100 million neurons. In fact, we have more neurons in our gut than we have in our spinal column. And these neurons are all communicating directly to the brain. So one of the things that is so interesting, I think, when we have overgrowths of bad bacteria, parasites, things like this going on in our gut, these creatures crave sugars. And so when we get that craving, when we hear I need sugar, it could be coming from parasite or bad bacteria in your gut communicating directly with your brain. And this is a really interesting thing to think when you get that next sugar craving. Is this me, or is this a bacteria or parasite in my system?
Hold on a minute, Juliette. You said that this was going to be suitable for people having their Sunday dinner. There's parasites in your system and bad bacteria. Well, I suppose, Juliette, it's good to be aware. Ignorance is no bliss.
Exactly. And studies show that up to 70% of the population at one time have parasites in their system. So this is something that, isn't just a passing fad. It's not just something that kids may get occasionally. Most people are walking around with parasites, and they may have had them for 20, 30 years and not had a clue.
Where'd they get them from? I mean, do you go to a parasite shop? I mean, is it like COVID? You have to wear a mask over your bottom. I mean, come on, Juliette. What is going on here? I mean, how do these things spread? Is it if you've got a dog or something, you pat the dog?
So it can be from pets for sure. Pets are one source.
Sorry, dog lovers.
It can be from your water. It can be from meat. It can be from fish. There are a lot of cases from sushi and from things like that of parasites. So, meat, fish, water, animals, also surfaces. If you've if someone's got a parasite and they itch their bottom and they get eggs on their hands and then touch food or a surface, then they can be picked up by other people.
Oh my golly gosh. So Juliette, give us some good news. How can we get rid of these bad boys?
Well, there's lots of ways that we can get rid of them. And what I recommend people do is once a year do a parasite cleanse, because that way you're keeping those critters at bay or getting rid of them. Because what these parasites are going to do is they're going to be stealing the top of all your nutrients. They're going to be leaving you feeling tired, maybe having a brain fog, maybe causing you food intolerances, maybe causing you bloating. Some people walk around just think they're always tired permanently, and that's just their state of being. And they don't realise that it's potentially coming from something like a parasite. Other people have severe reactions and do find out quickly that they've got something like H. pylori. Or a more serious one. If you travel in different countries, you can pick up parasites that can be quite severe. But generally, we're in England. The parasites that people have aren't that dangerous, but they are stealing your nutrients and they are robbing your energy. So it is something that you do need to address. And there are great foods out there that you can add in. So one of the great things that you can have on a regular basis, which kills parasite eggs, are cloves. So, you think about the hot countries, like places like India, for example. They make a chai tea, which they have every day. What's that got in it? Cloves, star anise, black pepper, all of these things which kill parasites. They use chili a lot in hot climates because parasites breed more in hot climates, in the meat and things like that. So chilies, they kill parasites. Horseradish kills parasites. So what I would recommend is that you get a good parasite cleanse, which usually would consist of black walnut hull, wormwood, and clove. And you do a course of that. Always important, if you're doing something like this, to contact a healthcare practitioner just to make sure that the things you're taking don't have any contraindications with medications or anything else. Because things like wormwood you shouldn't have if you've got any liver conditions. So it's always best to check these things, but they are very safe as long as you fit the parameters.
Yeah, and just to get rid of some of those bad ones, I mean, you're just talking about some of these things you can pick up, in foreign climes, and it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we've lived in India, and the local people are all drinking out of the local standpipe,
yeah.
And they've just got used to these bugs. In a way, and the Westerner goes over there and gets a case of what we know in the trade as the old Delhi belly. I once went to the Himalayas and got giardia. I tell you what, it wasn't pretty. Anyway, we'll move on.
No, I bet. When we were out in India, I spoke to some of the local people and I asked them about stomach things and parasites. And quite often, the ones I spoke to contacted the homeopaths and would get an Ayurvedic, or the Ayurvedic doctors, and get an Ayurvedic remedy that would clear out their children and them. One kind of herbal pill that flushed out everything from the system. So they have these methods to clear out things.
Is it the pomegranate seeds as well, Juliette?
Yeah, pomegranate seeds, pumpkin seeds, also raw carrots, all of these things. Those
Papaya.
Specifically are good for treating worms,
Okay.
threadworms, which children quite often get when they're young. So those are the specific things: raw carrots, pumpkin seeds, pomegranate seeds and papaya seeds. Those are all great for those. As I said, cloves are probably one of the best remedies to have on a regular basis just to keep those things away. But there are some great parasite cleanses out there for kids and for grown-ups. I would personally go herbal as opposed to the over-the-counter because they have more effectiveness long-term. But the gut does consist of more than just parasites.
Let's move on swiftly, Julia. I was just about to tell a story about grapefruit seed extract, but we'll move on. Thank you.
So in our gut, how I like to imagine it is it's like a beautiful garden. And within this beautiful garden, when you're born, you're meant to have 20% weeds, so the things that are useful like your nettles and your dandelions, and 80% plants. Now, the weeds represent the bad bacteria and the plants represent the good bacteria. Now, bad bacteria has its place. It's important for our digestive process, but we don't want it to take over. And bad bacteria, just like weeds, can grow very quickly and become very prolific. And this is when we have an imbalance in our digestive system.
Yeah.
So we want to keep that 80-20 ratio approximately.
Right.
And you're probably thinking, well, how on earth am I going to know if my bacteria is 80-20? But that is something obviously that's more conceptual, and I use muscle testing and dowsing and things like that to find that out. But basically, when you're born, if you've had a vaginal birth, if you've been breastfed, if you've been exposed to lots of good bacteria in the environment, you've got muddy, you've played, then you might have this great 80-20 when you're born. But one of the fascinating things about the gut is that we get our mother's gut at the time of birth. So as someone comes out through the vaginal canal, they become inoculated with their mother's bacteria. So quite often I have people say, oh, well, it's hereditary. My mum had IBS and I've got IBS and her mum had IBS. It's just, it just runs in the family.
We've heard those stories, haven't we, before, Juliette?
Yeah. But actually what's running in the family is the bacteria that's maybe been passed down for thousands of years. It's fascinating when you think about it in this way.
Or possibly they all had a bad diet.
Yeah, exactly. But this bacteria is all being passed down. So we have these parts of our grandmother, our great-grandmother, our great-great-grandmother inside us with these bacteria, which can be very ancient. So making sure that we look at our gut is a really key thing. So as I said, we want this 80-20 balance approximately. So what people quite often do is they say, well, I'm taking acidophilus.
Or more commonly, people say, I have those yogurts.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
We get that a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
I've heard about the benefits of probiotics. I have those yogurts. We're not going to name any brands.
Yeah. And quite often those yogurts are very high sugar, wonderfully marketed, very low bacteria products. So they're not going to do very much benefit for the gut. And really, with the gut, as I said, it's a 3-step process. And I've got an online course, How to Heal the Gut, which is a 4-module course, which really goes into this in depth because it's a massive subject and it's such a fascinating subject.
Thoroughly recommend that course. Just a little plug there on JulietteBryant.com. I think we'll have a special offer for Kindsound listeners. How about that, Juliette? Can
Definitely.
we do that?
Yeah, today, this week, if you use the code Kindsound, that's KINDA sound, then you can get the course for £33 instead of £97.
Oh, Juliette, a kind thing. So if you want to know, really get into depth about this, that's fantastic. So, Juliette, we're trying to get that 80-20 balance.
Yep.
Just a very quick one before you move on. What are some of the signs that people would have who don't have that balance right? What might be some symptoms that, maybe I need to look at improving my probiotic food and cleansing out the bad bacteria, but I know that because I am...
So if you've got like a lot of white fluffiness on your tongue, quite often, if you're getting bloating, if you're getting digestive discomfort when you're eating, if your poos are either very constipated or quite loose, if you, let's have a think, if you've got bad skin and you spots on your face, that can be a big sign of it.
Tiredness.
Tiredness, definitely.
Irritability.
Brain fog, that's another one. So all of these signs are potential signs of a bacterial imbalance. And it's very easy to address this. So if you have any of those signs, I would say definitely make a start on it. In fact, I would say for everyone, they should be addressing their gut because the gut is not something that you can look after once and then leave it. It's like a garden. You make a really beautiful garden and you leave it, those weeds are going to take over. And this is the same with our gut. We have to monitor it on a regular basis. So, for example, when you're monitoring it, if you had a garden and you just tried to keep planting nice plants, probiotics, good bacteria, and it was filled with weeds already, what's going to happen?
The weeds because they've got a more tenacity, they're going to take over, and that you're not really going to have a successful garden.
Exactly, and this is the same with the gut.
Right.
So it's kind of weed, plant,
Get out
weed,
your hoe.
plant, weed, plant. But you do it together. So you dig out the weeds and then you plant.
Okay.
And then you dig out more weeds and then you plant. So how you can weed your gut, things like basil, grapefruit seed extract, garlic, raw garlic especially, thyme, rosemary, all of those pungent herbs are very good at killing off bad bacteria. Oregano. So those things are all great ways that you can potentially start to kill off the bad bacteria. There are lots of others, but, as I said, if you want more detail, then have a look at my course, because it is a big subject. But then those are your weeders, and then you put in the good bacteria. So you add in your raw, unpasteurized sauerkraut. You add in your raw, unpasteurized kimchi, potentially. You add in your water kefir or your coconut kefir, or you could add in your kombucha. These are all natural probiotics that we can get from food, and very easy to make as well. On the course, I show you how to make these things so that you can do it at home for a very minimal price, because probiotic-rich foods can be expensive in the shops. But they don't have to be, because it can cost you, to make sauerkraut, you get a cabbage, organic cabbage, let's say if you're in the UK, 97p for an organic cabbage, a little bit of raw grey sea salt, so a few pence there, and that's it.
Many places as well, Juliette, to buy these things from, many companies starting to do deliveries and health food shops and things. And also just eating vegetables, the different coloured vegetables, they have different probiotics in, don't they? Different good bacteria.
Yeah, and one of the keys when you're having probiotics is to eat it with fruit and vegetables, because in the fruit and vegetables you have fibre that acts as a food for those probiotics. So let's say you have your glass of water kefir or your spoonful of sauerkraut with your meal. When you're eating that with the vegetables, then it's really adding to the fuel so that those probiotics can take hold in the gut at so much greater a level. And one of the things that's so interesting with that is that when you look at probiotics like Acidophilus, it's one strain. It's a very strong strain, but it's one strain of bacteria. In our guts, we have over 1,000 different strains of bacteria in there.
1,000 different strains of bacteria.
And that's just what they've identified. There could be millions, but they haven't identified it. So this is where we're at the moment. And so if you're eating just one strain of bacteria, putting that in, then that's going to cause like a monoculture. It's going to cause an imbalance. So if something comes along to wipe out that crop of corn, for example, your Acidophilus, then your whole defence is going to be taken out. Whereas if you're having things like sauerkraut, approximately 30 strains of bacteria in it. Water kefir, 35 to 40 strains of bacteria. You've already got 60 to 70 different strains of bacteria coming in with just those simple foods. So that's something really important to be aware of. And one of the other things is, if you go and pick an apple fresh off the tree, that apple is filled with probiotics and prebiotics because you've not washed it, it's not been sprayed, it's not been bleached, it's not been had any of these things happen to it. It's in its natural state. So it's got the most of these microbacteria.
Yes, these beneficial microorganisms. Absolutely fascinating. Juliette, can you talk a little bit about the connection between the gut and mental health? I know in Cambridge we have a fantastic doctor, Natasha Campbell McBride, who's done so much fascinating research on the connection between gut health and mental health.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and she really has pioneered it. And her work with autistic children and grown-ups has been quite revolutionary. She created something called the GAP diet, which is really looking at healing the gut and flushing out heavy metals from the system and rebalancing the gut to reduce symptoms in people, and had, such profound results.
Yeah. We're talking about autism, and ADHD and anxiety and depression and many things people are finding, aren't they, as they're cleaning out their guts, as they're balancing that good bacteria again. It's helping their mental health. Now, is this because we've got all these neural cells in the gut? Are there other reasons for it? You mentioned heavy metals there. Wow, that's a subject, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, so when we look at the gut, It is to do with the neural cells in our gut communicating with our brain, but it's also to do with, quite often what happens is if we have a lot of bad bacteria or fungal overgrowths known as candida, this is very rife in a lot of people because of the amount of sugars that are consumed in the diet. What happens, for example, with candida is that the candida attaches itself to the wall of the gut, to the gut lining, and puts holes in it basically. It reduces the gut permeability. So the gut wall starts to lose strength and little gaps start to open up within it. And through these little gut gaps, what happens is food particles that haven't been fully digested escape into the bloodstream. Now, this is poison for our system. That food in our gut is not poison, but that's because it's in the right place. Because it has not been fully broken down, when it enters into our body like this, it's causing toxicity. It's causing us to have an immune response. And it's also creating a lot of issues within our brain, feelings of depression, anxiety. All these things are potentially linked to this gut permeability, these toxins, these proteins escaping through into the bloodstream, poisoning our system. So strengthening your gut lining is a really, really important thing. And this can be done very simply. One of the best foods that we can incorporate into our diet to heal gut permeability is turmeric. Turmeric works to knit the cells back together in the gut lining. Also, having good fats in our diet helps this process as well. Things like aloe, slippery elm, these are all things that help to reseal the gut lining. And of course, putting those good bacteria in is a really key thing as well. One of the really interesting things when it comes to gut health is that 80% of our serotonin, so serotonin is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy and good, up. So 80% of our serotonin is produced, guess where?
I would suggest everyone out there, I think we know the answer, and it rhymes with cut.
Exactly.
And butt.
It's not in the brain, as a lot of us believe. It's actually in the gut. So dopamine, a lot of our dopamine production is in the gut. So all of these neurotransmitters are being produced in the gut to a large extent, as opposed to actually in our brain. So what that means is that our mental health is being produced in a large part in our gut. So getting that balance of bacteria right, making sure that we're getting rid of parasites, making sure we're healing our gut lining, making sure that we're removing things like candida. And one of the key things is making sure that we are really supporting our gut to move forward by putting the right foods into it.
Putting foods in that are nurturing us and not poisoning. Before we move on, Julia, into the foods, just something's come to my mind. The word antibiotic. What is the effect? We know now that it's one of the greatest health disasters facing humanity is antibiotic resistance, because now these bacteria, they've been around, like you say, for billions of years. They're very clever. So there's all these infections, and then the antibiotics have been overprescribed. This is now widely accepted medically, and the superbugs are becoming unleashed. But what is the effect of an antibiotic? If people are taking antibiotics, of course, if you need to take them, people, they can be life-saving.
Yep.
But what's the effect of unnecessary antibiotic use on the gut health or any antibiotics?
So I've got a great story that reflects this really well. My oldest child, when he was 2 actually, we went to the doctors because he had an ear infection. And anyone who's had a child with an ear infection, it being my first child, my gosh, he was up in the night screaming, an ear-piercing scream. And I thought, oh God, I've got to get him to the doctors. It was horrendous, really, really heartbreaking. So I took him to the doctors and they prescribed antibiotics, which I gave him because I thought that I don't want his eardrum bursting, etc., etc.
You didn't know any better, did you? You
First
didn't know
time
any
he'd had
alternatives.
antibiotics.
Okay.
And I thought, well, one time, that's fine. Anyway, a month and a half, 2 months later, he gets a cold for a day and boom, his ear gets infected again.
Back again.
So I went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, you need antibiotics again." I said, "But he just had
Oh,
them
no,
a month
hold
and a half ago. This can't be right." And she
Give
said,
them
"Well,"
again.
she said, "the thing is, now that he's had an ear infection once, what will happen is every time he gets a cold, he'll get an ear infection." I said, "So what, you're saying every time he gets a cold, he's going to need to take antibiotics?" And they said, "Yes, I'm afraid so." And I went, "Whoa, hang on." And that was
My
a
God.
really good lesson, because
My
it
God.
snapped me out of something into researching and more awareness. So I took the prescription. I thought, I'm not feeling that, but I'm going to take it just in case. I went home and started researching and looked at natural remedies for ear infections. So I found out about chopping up garlic in olive oil and lightly cooking it, very lightly cooking it, and then leaving it to cool and then putting that in the ear. So we tried that. Boom, ear infection went straight away. The point of the story is, what can happen very often is that something like an ear infection or tonsillitis or something like this, these reoccurring infections, bladder infection is a very common one as well. What happens is that bacteria, the antibiotic, goes into the system and wipes out good and bad bacteria.
Yep, that's what I heard.
So it's a bit like you've kind of sprayed your garden and cleared out everything.
You've killed your dahlias.
Yep.
And the slugs.
And the weeds.
And the thrush that eats the slugs.
Exactly.
You've killed it all.
But
clever.
What happens is you've killed it all. Now, if you've gardened, you know that very shortly what will come up are all those weeds. The plants won't be the first ones up because the weeds are more tenacious, as you said.
Oh, I see.
So up come the weeds.
I understand.
Now, the weeds are that reoccurring infection.
Yes.
If you've got a strong defence line, if you've got your plants all in place, those weeds can't come up. So what's happening is that you're wiping out the good and bad bacteria, but you're wiping out your army. So next time those bacteria come, there's nothing to stop them taking over and that infection becoming worse. So this pattern, this reoccurring pattern then occurs. And as Giles said, if you need antibiotics, they can be a lifesaver taken at the right time. It's an amazing step in medicine that coming across it.
It saved lives, we can admit that. But the overuse
is causing a mass harm. And this is what we have to get away from.
Absolutely.
So for me and my family, what do? Well, garlic, natural antibiotic, 39 different antibiotic strains within it. Now, you're probably saying, but you just said that antibiotics killed everything. So how is garlic a natural antibiotic?
Strong,
and that's fine. Now, this is a really, really interesting concept. So in nature, what happens is that good and bad bacteria have slightly different geometric structures to it. So when you take garlic is able to distinguish between the good and bad and only targets the bad bacteria, not the good, because of the difference in the geometric structure. Whereas the antibiotics synthetically created haven't got that awareness, that kind of extra consciousness to it, and so just wipes everything out. So this is such an interesting concept. So when we start to use natural antibiotics, then we can really get somewhere.
I just a little story very quickly, Julia. I haven't had taken antibiotics for 30 years. I don't even know, maybe 30 years. And when I've had dental problems, and we all know what that terrible toothache's like. I've really hit those infections, those abscesses, with a combination of the things that you're talking about, and I've got through it. I've really got through it, and I think it is possible, isn't it, with these natural methods. Probably that doctor that you took the boy to, she didn't know any other alternative, and she hadn't been trained, and she was just trying to give the sweeties out like candy. I don't think they're quite so bad now, are they?
No,
because they
I
know.
Think 16 years or 15 years on,
they learned, haven't
more
they?
Of a clue
They've
now.
learned about the dangers of overprescription.
Totally. So it's something to be aware of, but I think it's always important to, for me, what I do is I always look to the natural remedies first, and if I can't battle it with the natural remedies, then I take that next step to see the doctor to see what those next steps are. But for me, I know I've got a wide knowledge of natural remedies and a trust, and I think that's a key part of it. If you've had successes with them and you've known you've got through many ear infections with the kids, then you can do it. So it's about that understanding and awareness. And that's something that in my work I help people and guide people into that trust and that deeper connection so that they do have those toolkits at hand. And that's one of the things that I think that people love from my mentorship program is that 12 weeks of saying, this has come up, my child's got this, or I'm feeling like this. What can I take? How can I empower myself and my family's health? And that's for me why I love this work, really helping people to feel empowered.
Well, Juliette, we've given so much information out, or you have, in this half an hour show. Don't forget, if you want to get Juliette's Heal the Gut course at a very special price, then you can go to our website, juliettebryant.com, and the code is Kindsound. Juliette, thank you ever so much.
Lots of love to you all.